Revealed, the cursed rules of Chicago's haunted subway tunnels. Unexplainable dangers await. The wind howled through the streets of Chicago like a mournful ghost, while shadows danced maniacally across walls as Mia stepped into the drenched subway station, the entrance a dark moth swallowing the light. She shivered, the bleak familiarity of her late-night shift sending a jolt of unease through her. It was just another Tuesday, but tonight felt like the shadows were alive, their whispers wrapping around her like a noose. Her heart raced as she recalled the warnings from old-timers' stories of curses, missing souls, whispers of the damned. Was it just a myth? Mia shook her head, unwilling to let superstition creep into her mind as she began her rounds. The graffiti kissed the cement walls, vibrant yet disturbing. What once had been bold colors and urban art now seemed like a sinister language, symbols twisting into ominous shapes only understood by those drowning in shadows. She flicked through the bleak corridors with her flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating passages that felt too cavernous, too alive. A buzz from her phone pulled her from her thoughts, Alex's name flashing across the screen. Just got home. Miss you. She inhaled sharply. Alone in their small apartment, he was her world, and the idea of anything happening to him turned her blood cold. The deeper she pushed into the station, the more the air thickened with fear. There, at the old platform, she spotted familiar faces, neighbors whose secrets tangled as tightly as their fear. Murmurs whispered like dry leaves scraping against asphalt. "They're just disappearing," one man said, his eyes darting left and right. "Last seen near the old tunnel by Clark. They said it's cursed." Her stomach twisted. She knew those names, faces that once shared groceries or waved hello. Just a whisper could change everything. Before she could gather her thoughts, the lights above flickered, the sound a cruel cackle echoing through the hollow space. Darkness enveloped her like a wet blanket, she felt it swallow her whole. Instinct kicked in, and she reached for her flashlight, but as she pointed the beam ahead, all it revealed were more of those haunted symbols. Panic flooded her veins. Then came the whispers, not just echoes in the wind but a chorus rising from the depths of the subway, pressing in on her. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Mia's breath came in frantic gasps. Every instinct urged her to turn and run, but in the darkness, she felt something move, something that didn't want her to leave. Heart racing, she jetted toward the exit, but halted mid-step. A glint caught her eye on the ground. An old police badge, caked in grime but unmistakably familiar. The officer connected to the neighborhood involved in long-buried secrets. Fear clawed at her throat, and she felt doubt slither in. Who were the real predators here? Just as she turned to flee, she felt it, a cold hand grazed her shoulder. Before she could scream, she was suspended in the grip of an unseen force, and all hope faded as she stared into the abyss, realizing that the shadows were just the beginning. There was no going back. Not now. Mia's heart thundered, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the suffocating darkness. The hand, cold and unyielding, slid from her shoulder, but the presence lingered, an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. Fear clawed at the edges of her mind, urging her to scream, to flee. Yet she stood frozen, staring into the abyss, her breath hitching in her throat. The whispers crescendoed around her, rising and falling like the breath of 1,000 lost souls. Each syllable seemed to claw their way into her consciousness, a tangled mess of warnings and despair. What had she become a part of? What game was she stumbling into? With a burst of adrenaline, she tore herself from the grip of stillness and dashed down the tunnel, the light from her flashlight flickering like a dying star. Every step echoed ominously, her shoes slapping against the wet, grimy floor. Shadows stretched and shifted, mocking her desperation. Was it just her imagination, or were they watching, inching closer? As she rounded a corner, she came to a sudden halt. The passage widened into a cavernous area, far darker than what bordered it. The light met a thick, choking blackness that swallowed the beam within moments. Mia felt eyes there, fixed on her, hungry. She swallowed hard and whispered a plea to the universe that it was all a nightmare. Then she saw a figure standing at the far end of the cavern. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, a shadow too long for any normal human. Its features were indistinguishable, but she felt it scan her, an icy chill washing over her. "Help," she managed to croak, but the word was stolen from her as the figure lifted an arm, pointing at her with a bony finger. A tremor of dread blossomed in her stomach. This wasn't just fear, it was pure, unbridled terror coursing through her veins. Mia spun to escape, but reality shifted around her. The walls seemed to close in, the tunnel widening to create a maze scattered with whispers of the past, the screams of the missing and the damned darting past her ears like errant breeze. "You can't go back," they hissed. "Join us," but she couldn't. Mia couldn't entertain the thought of disappearing into the horror lurking in these tunnels. Steeling herself, she sprinted toward what looked like an exit far in the dark, praying that it would lead her back to safety. The sound of her own heart splattered against her senses like a driving rain. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath her like the station itself was alive. A rumbling pulse vibrated through her feet, and debris began to cascade from the walls. "Not again!" she shrieked, twisting to flee. She could feel the shadows at her back, clinging to her, whispering that this labor was in vain, only delaying the inevitable. Mia barely made it to the next junction when the very air chemistry changed. A detonation of darkness exploded from behind her, filling the corridor with a wave of chill that snuffed her light completely. Darkness wrapped around her, suffocating her senses. Then came the scream, a resonant wail piercing through the noise, melodic yet agonizing. Blind panic surged through her. "Alex, I'm coming!" she cried, voice hoarse, knowing it was her own fight she had to win, even as those ghostly forms curled around the edges of her vision. Her flashlight flickered back to life one last time, revealing the exit sign glowing dimly in the distance. Hope flickered alongside it. She could not get trapped here. Gritting her teeth, she surged forward with all her might, reaching for the light, pushing through the crushing darkness that seemed to pull her back. But just as Mia reached for salvation, she felt something wrap tightly around her ankle, a vine of shadows pulling her into the void. She screamed, the sound swallowed by the darkness as it closed in, and the void laughed. Everything went black. What lay beyond the veil? A tinge of fear seeped inside her, knowing that the shadows had no end and she might not be alone in the dark for long. Mia's world was pitch black. A suffocating silence enveloped her, the kind that made every breath feel like a crime against the void. She blinked, trying to force her eyes to adapt to the dark, but it was a futile act. Time lost meaning as she lay still, the icy grip of shadows still coiling around her ankle. Suddenly, the silence shattered. A long, echoing laugh bounced around the cavern, twisting through the dark like a viper. It was a sound like no other, both haunting and joyful, as if the darkness itself took pleasure in her despair. That laugh sent a jolt of ice into her veins, shattering the paralysis gripping her. "Get up!" She spat at herself, but her body betrayed her. The shadows seemed to tighten their grip, dragging her deeper. She kicked and struggled, desperate to break free. As her foot connected with the solid ground, she felt its rough surface scrape against her skin. That small sensation ignited a flicker of determination within her. With a force of will that surprised her, she yanked her leg, feeling the shadows loosen, just enough. She scrambled to her feet and bolted forward into the unknown, the laughter echoing behind her, furious at her defiance. The darkness pressed against her, thick and oppressive, but she refused to let it swallow her whole. The air shifted again, heavy with dread as the whispers returned, more frantic this time, "Don't go. Stay with us. They clawed at her heart like 100 icy fingers. But Mia clenched her fists, remembering Alex, the pressing urgency of finding him. I can't. I want tea. She shouted, pushing harder against the weight of the gloom. Her flashlight flickered intermittently, revealing glimpses of the tunnel walls. Graffiti scrawled in frantic strokes warned of the devourer, lost souls ahead, and turn back. Each sight twisted in her stomach, adding urgency to her escape. She had to keep moving. What was behind her? Did they speak of the same devourer that had stalked her in the depths of her dream, demonic and insatiable? The thought filled her chest with icy dread, but it thrummed alongside a growing anger. She wouldn't let fear win. With a single-minded focus, she charged deeper into the abyss. The shadows writhed and swirled, as if the very darkness came alive to thwart her, but momentum fueled her. The sound of her thudding heart synchronized with the relentless whispering, a cacophony of muted screams that grew louder, mixing with the echoes around her. She skidded to a halt. Ahead, the tunnel forked into two unseen routes. The air stirred with a static charge, and panic flared in her throat. Which path? A sudden thought flashed through her mind. The figure that had pointed at her it had been signaling. Did it want her here, stuck in the middle, or guiding her somewhere? Which way? She gasped. Which one? A primal instinct told her to run back toward the faint echo of laughter, toward the familiar dread, or was it the promise of safety? Time stretched, conflict brewing in her mind. The tunnel behind her was darkness incarnate, nothing more than a prison. But beyond? She glanced at the left tunnel, the air rippling as though something waited, something alive. Go! The whispers hissed. Go back. But Mia had made her choice. She took a breath, lifting her chin. She bolted left, deeper into the heart of the unknown. As she plunged ahead, she felt an unyielding force push against her, dragging at her limbs. Fear clawed at her insides. Then the scream erupted again, piercing her, as if calling her name. It was Alex. In that moment, everything halted. The echoes of the past converged, and she knew she wasn't alone anymore. What had been searching for her? What other lost souls lurked, waiting to claim their share of despair? The cavern loomed ahead, letting out a breath that smelled of decay. Mia squared her shoulders, heart pounding. She had to press on. But with each step, she felt the darkness closing in, and she knew something terrible awaited her. Was she ready to uncover the truth, or had she chosen her fate? Mia's heart raced as she plunged deeper into the left tunnel, her footsteps echoing ominously against the damp stone. The thick air felt charged with a malevolence that whispered of ancient fears. Every flicker of her flashlight, each beam illuminating grotesque shadows, sent jolts through her body. She could almost feel the walls closing in. Suddenly, the laughter erupted again, louder, more taunting. It felt like a hand clawing at her sanity, pulling her back into the darkness. You can't escape. It jeered, a voice woven with malice and delight. The more she ran, the more it chased her. The realization hit her hard: whatever lurked in this shadowed cavity thrived on her terror. Alex! She screamed into the void, her voice swallowed whole. No reply came, only the twisted laughter curling around her, seducing her to submit. With a resolve that nearly broke her, she pressed on, the cold sweat running down her back mixing with a tissue of unresolved fear. Then, she stumbled into a large, open space that felt like the cavernous mouth of a beast. She inhaled sharply. Decay and dampness filled her lungs. Graffiti painted the walls in frenzied strokes, warnings and curses intertwined with haunting faces, their eyes darting at her with desperate liveliness. The Hunger Awakens read one, while another simply begged, help. A disoriented gasp escaped her lips as her flashlight flickered again, this time catching something in the corner. A figure. It stood shrouded in darkness, its features indistinguishable but glistening wetly, like a creature drenched in despair, waiting in silence. Mia felt her stomach lurch. She squinted, battling the dread curling around her heart. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but still held an unsettling allure. "Alex?" she whimpered, fear freezing her limbs. But the figure didn't answer. Instead, it pointed a slow, deliberate gesture toward a wall adorned with symbols. The deep gashes scratched into the stone told tales of the damned. Words like sacrifice and forever lost chilled her. They felt less like warnings and more like decrees binding her to fate. She stepped closer despite chanting screams in her mind urging her to flee. Every instinct screamed at her, but she had come this far. The whispers returned, now more insistent. "Join us." Surrender become one. They gnawed at her resolve, pulling her toward the symbols. She wanted to scream back, to tell them she would never yield. Suddenly, the creature stirred, its head tilting as if it had heard her thoughts. The shadows began roiling, swirling and thickening around her, threatening to pull her under. A flash of motion from behind it caught her eye. Another figure emerged, then another, until the darkness was teeming with them, lost souls, trapped and tormented, their eyes full of despair. "Help us!" they chorused in unison, their voices a haunting echo, cutting at her sanity. Mia felt her heart plummet. Did they mean Alex? Were they trying to warn her? Or was this an invitation to join their damned ranks? She wanted to turn and flee, but something tugged at her, a deep, aching pull that was hard to resist. Then, the not-so-distant sound of Alex's scream echoed again, louder this time, filled with agony. It pierced through the chorus of the lost, slicing her heart with raw urgency. She hesitated, torn between the pleading faces of the lost and the desperate call of her brother. That moment stretched infinitely, leaving her perilously suspended between hope and despair. If she went to him, would she leave her humanity behind forever? With every ounce of strength, she forced herself to look away from the souls clawing for her and sprinted toward the sound. But as she did, she felt a cold hand clasp her wrist. "Caught!" Mia gasped, tearing around, her voice a frantic shriek. "No! Let me go!" But the grip was tight, and the shadows surged around her, a storm of anguish and hunger. What had she walked into? What truth would she have to face? Panic surged through Mia's veins as the icy fingers tightened around her wrist. She felt the chills seep into her bones, the cold latching onto her soul. The laughter roared around her, mocking her frenzied struggle. "Let go!" she screamed, yanking her arm. But the grip was unyielding, and she was pulled closer to the figures that writhed in the darkness. Their faces twisted and blurred, an ever-shifting nightmare of anguish. They were begging, pleading, eyes locked onto hers, shattering her resolve. "Join us," they whispered, the voices merging into a single, haunting melody. The words slipped like oil into her mind, a slick persuasion that threatened to drown her. Desperation flared. "Alex!" she cried again, the name a lifeline thrown into the abyss. The shadows around her shuddered, and for a fleeting moment, they pulled back, exposing a narrow passage just beyond the horde of lost souls. Mia's instincts fired. She twisted, catching a glimpse of the figure that had first pointed her way. It stood menacingly still, its face still a mask of darkness, but its eyes glinted with something that felt almost human, a trace of hope or warning. She couldn't tell, and that uncertainty clawed at her. "Run!" the creature seemed to hiss, though she doubted its intentions. But the thought of Alex drove her forward. She lunged toward the narrow opening, shocking her senses as she broke free from that bone-chilling grip. The laughter turned into anguished howls, echoing and reverberating through the tunnel as if they could sense her defiance. Mia dashed into the passage, heart pounding like a caged animal. She stumbled over uneven stones, her flashlight darting wildly, barely illuminating the path ahead. Shadows shimmied at the corner of her eye, but she wouldn't look back. Not yet. Rounding a corner, she suddenly halted as the tunnel widened again, revealing a horrifying tableau. Bodies littered the ground, their faces frozen in terror, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Were they the lost souls? She felt bile rise in her throat. But in the center of the grotesque scene, she spotted a familiar shape, tangled in shadow but unmistakably her brother. Alex! She gasped, a mixture of relief and horror flooding her. He lay motionless, surrounded by flickering shadows that seemed alive, slithering around him like snakes. Alex! She shouted again, racing toward him, fear and determination fueling her. Help, he murmured, barely audible. His voice was haunted, drenched in despair. Just as she reached his side, the shadows surged forward like a living wave, hungry and relentless. Mia felt them crash over her, pulling at her. Each tendril felt like a nightmare pouring over her skin, seeking to wrap around her heart. No! Not again. The fight went out of her for a moment, but she remembered the toll of inaction, the heedless surrender she had only just evaded. Clenching her fists, she pulled her brother to his feet, struggling against the tide of darkness clinging to them both. The figure from before was there now, looming larger, an insidious barrier before them. It raised a hand, and the laughter rose again, becoming an orchestrated cacophony of wails and pleas. Stop! This is your end. Trembling, Mia faced it, her heart racing. We won't stop. She declared, feeling a flicker of defiance flaring inside her. We won't be lost. With a swift motion, she pushed Alex behind her, her body forming a shield against the looming dark. But what now? How did they fight against shadows that seemed to feed off fear itself? Just as the creature lunged, ready to snatch her, Mia's light flickered back to life. It caught the creature's eyes, sparking a moment of hesitation. Mia? Alex's voice trembled, and her heart soared momentarily. But the darkness would not be denied, tightening around them, pulling them back. What unseen force was orchestrating this dance of despair? As the shadows surged once more, they realized the truth lay deeper still. In that pulse of dread, they had to make a choice, but at what cost? Mia's grip tightened around Alex as the shadows writhed with malicious hunger. The air turned thick, oppressive, and every breath felt like a battle against the growing darkness. The wails of the tormented echoed around them, mocking her determination. You won't take us. She shouted, though the words felt fragile against the onslaught. Fight! Alex rasped, his hand slipping from her grasp. In the fleeting light of her flashlight, she saw a thin veil of shadows creeping over him, threatening to drag him down into the abyss that had claimed so many before. No! Mia screamed, lunging forward to reclaim him. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if stung by her defiance. She felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly followed by dread as the creature stepped closer, its form growing darker, more defined. What do you want? She shouted. Her voice cracked in the echoing tunnel, tinged with fear but laced with anger. The figure shifted, its shape contorting in a grotesque ballet of darkness, limbs stretching unnaturally with every movement. Your souls belong with us, it crooned, the whisper slithering through the air like smoke. Your fight only prolongs the inevitable. No! Alex shouted, scrambling to his feet beside Mia. We'll never give in. But the shadows embraced him, pulling him close with a possessive, wicked caress. He shuddered, caught in their embrace, and Mia felt the heat of panic blaze hotter in her chest. The flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the tunnel walls, revealing more horrors hidden in the gloom. Faces, eyes wide, mouths gaping, emerged from the dark, the hollow expressions of the lost. They reached for her, mouth forming silent screams. Mia's heart sank. They were not just shadows, they were remnants of those who had come before. How many must you lose? The creature taunted, stepping ever closer, emanating an aura of despair. They join me willingly, just as you will. Stop it! Mia screamed, hurling the flashlight into the encroaching dark. It shattered against the stone wall, sending sparks into the void. In that brief moment of brightness, she caught sight of something, a glimmer of silver beneath the crushed darkness. A pipe? A handle? Her instincts screamed it could be a way out. Quick! She yelled, pulling Alex back from the shadow's grasp. The urge to surrender clawed at her, but she gritted her teeth against it. We have to move. Panic surged through her as she yanked him along, plunging deeper into the eerily still passages of the tunnel. The laughter of the shadows followed them, sinister and persistent. They stumbled into a larger chamber, the ground strewn with debris and remnants of those who had lost their battles, pieces of clothing, broken items. Even are those bones? Mia gasped, horror swallowing her voice as she came to a halt. Alex's eyes widened, reflecting the pale beams of the flashlight now flickering and barely holding on. Keep moving, he urged, his fear palpable. The shadows collided against the chamber walls, like a heavy tide, advancing toward them. Their laughter grew, morphing into a crescendo of manic delight, a sound that could drive a person insane. Then, an unexpected whisper cut through the chaos, sharp and clear. You can break the curse. Mia's heart stopped. It was no longer her imagination. That voice belonged to someone trapped, perhaps another lost soul, desperately reaching out. What do you mean? She yelled into the dark, her voice shaking with uncertainty. Break the rules, find the key. The voice faded, leaving only the echo of its warning reverberating through the chamber. What rules? Mia whispered, knowing the shadows were closing in, feeling a suffocating grip tightening around her throat. What key? Alex pulled her toward a wall where the shadows clung with mocking malice. We have to figure it out now. But as she attempted to decipher the meaning behind the voice, a deep, rumbling growl filled the chamber. It was coming from behind, even darker shadows merging into something monstrous. Run! She screamed again, her heart pounding against her ribcage as they dashed forward. What would they find on the other side? Could there really be a way out? With every heartbeat, an oppressive weight pressed down on them. They were up against fate, light dimming, shadows blocking their escape. Maybe there was a truth hidden here in this nightmare, or perhaps it was just another trap. As they sprinted, the devastating reality dawned on Mia. Would they have to confront the very rules of this world, or would the darkness consume them both? All she could hope was that the key awaited them somewhere ahead, a promise of freedom or a descent into deeper terror. What if the thought haunted her as they ran, echoing through her mind? What if the key is sacrifice? And as they veered into the unknown, Mia realized the true battle had only just begun. They ran through the chamber, adrenaline coursing through their veins, darkness nipping at their heels. The rumbling growl morphed into a thunderous roar, echoing around them, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Mia could feel the shadows pulse alive, hungry, relentless. Left! Alex shouted, suddenly veering in that direction. The walls closed in, flaking stone and damp earth looming. She followed without hesitation, trusting him even with fear clawing at her insides. They stumbled into another narrow passage, the air thick as molasses. It pressed against her chest, nearly choking her. I can't breathe. She gasped, her lungs burning. Keep moving. He yelled back, eyes wide, urgency radiating off him. They dashed on, barely registering the disjointed whispers, voices that sliced through the air, repeating her worst fears. How many had suffered in this abyss? How many lost souls haunted these tunnels, screaming for rescue that would never come? As they turned another corner, the passage opened into a wider, more grotesque room. Old graffiti covered the walls, warnings scrawled in desperate handwriting beneath layers of grime. Images of eyes, mouths wide open in silent terror. At the center, a pulsating dark mass writhed. It quivered as if alive, consuming everything around it and cradling remnants of those it had claimed. The rumbling seemed closer now, vibrating through the floorboards. We have to find the key, she cried, her voice threatening to crack under the pressure. Where? Alex shouted over the relentless whispers, his expression filled with fear and determination. Mia's gaze darted around. Amid the debris, she saw glimmers of light metallic items half buried in the rubble. Her fingers brushed against something cold and sharp. She pulled at it. It was an old, rusted key. The moment she held it up, the shadows recoiled as if burned. Could this be it? She asked, hope blossoming momentarily. Try it. Alex urged, as the growl roared again, echoing through the chamber, intensifying like a storm. She ran toward the pulsating darkness, feeling the shadows grasping at her ankles, but she pressed on, the key held tightly in her fist. With every step, glimmers of light began illuminating the darkness around them, dancing with the shimmer of hope. Here goes nothing. She shouted, her heart hammering as she approached a thick, shadowy door hidden amongst the chaos. Desperation overtook her, driving her forward. The key slid into the lock, and she twisted it with all her strength. With a deafening bang, the door flew open, and a blinding light burst forth, enveloping her. She stumbled backward, shielding her eyes. The shadows shrieked, their cries a cacophony of rage and despair, leaping away from the light. In, now! Alex shouted, dragging her inside just as the darkness recoiled violently, clawing to reclaim them. They fell into whatever lay beyond, gasping for air, wiping the grime from their faces. When they recovered, they found themselves in a space that felt surreal, starkly white, too bright and clean compared to the filthy chaos they had escaped. But their brief moment of relief faded as they took in their surroundings. The room was filled with odd materials, twisted chains, jars of murky remnants, and a massive board covered in ominous symbols that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. A feeling of dread washed over them. This was a sanctuary, but it felt wrong, tainted. A figure shot up from one of the shadows, a woman, eyes wild and desperate. "You should not be here," she cried, reaching out. "You've unleashed something that should remain bound." "What do you mean?" "We just escaped," Mia yelled, trembling with confusion. "No one escapes the curse," she hissed, her voice a mix of fear and desperation. "You've brought the darkness with you." The growling started again, rising in pitch, a spectral anger. Faces of the lost emerged in the shadows, their mouths moving in screams that echoed in the chamber. Despair choked her. They were not free. They were perhaps even deeper in danger than before. "What is happening?" Alex gasped, as panic flared across his face. The shadows pressed against their sanctuary, relentless, waiting. "The rules," the woman whispered, as shadows encircled them. "You must understand the rules before you can break free." Mia felt dread take root deep within her. This nightmare was far from over. What rules? What would they have to do to truly escape? As darkness loomed ominously closer, Mia realized they might have to make a choice: sacrifice once more, or remain trapped forever in a cycle of horror. But what if their next move would cost them everything? "What are the rules, then?" she demanded urgently, but the shadows crashed against the barrier, and the chamber shuddered. "Find the truth," the woman whispered again, just as the shadows reached for them, the threat palpable. And in that moment, Mia knew, their fate hung in the balance. Would they unravel the mystery, or become one with the darkness forever? Mia's heart raced, each thump echoing in her ears as shadows twitched ominously around them. "What truth?" she managed to shout over the cacophony. The walls shook, the air thickening with a stench of decay. The woman's face twisted in terror, her eyes wide, glistening with frantic desperation. "The truth of your past. The key you hold, it binds you," she cried, as the shadows writhed closer. Before Mia could ask more, the shadows surged, clawing away at their sanctuary. An icy chill sliced through the air as she felt a presence, something ancient and malignant. Alex grasped her wrist, pulling her away from the encroaching darkness. "We can't stay here. We need to move." "Where do we go?" she yelled back, panic curdling her voice. Anywhere but here," he shouted. Their feet slipped against the slick floor as they ran, the bright room becoming a blurred memory. Behind them, the growling roared, a beast unleashed and furious. They bolted through a door that appeared beyond the shadows, stumbling through as the room shuddered violently. Inside, the air grew thicker, suffocating, as if the very atmosphere fed off their fear. "Look!" Alex pointed towards a wall plastered with news clippings, faded and torn. Mia rushed over, her eyes darting across the articles. Each headline screamed of missing persons, unexplained disappearances linked to the subway system. "They never found them," she murmured, the weight of despair settling on her shoulders. The woman had mentioned choices. What sacrifices had these lost souls made? "Mia!" Alex's voice snapped her back to reality. He was crouched beside a shattered mirror, its surface clouded but showing vague reflections. There's something behind it. He pried the mirror off the wall, revealing a small compartment, and out tumbled a worn journal, its leather cracked and peeling. Heart pounding, she opened it. The pages were filled with frantic scrawl, references to rituals, offerings to calm the darkness that sought to consume the living. "We have to do what they did," she whispered. "We need to perform this ritual." "Are you out of your mind?" Alex's eyes widened in horror. "Sacrifice? We can't, but we can't just wait to be devoured. We need to pacify it," she urged, desperation rising with every word. The growling began again, intensifying like a storm gathering strength. Shadows filled the corners, shifting and swirling, threatening to engulf them. Mia flipped through the journal, her fingers trembling as she tried to decipher the indiscernible handwriting. Then she found something that made her stomach drop: a list of items needed for the ritual. Mostly mundane: salt, candles, photographs of the lost. Yet one thing sent shivers through her spine: "Offer that which binds you." "What does that even mean?" Alex barked, fear coating his words. "It means..." She hesitated, gut twisted in dread. "It means one of us has to go." "No, Mia. No way. We can find another way." His eyes flared with panic, but in her heart, she knew he might be right. The darker truth loomed larger than any choice they made. The shadows surged again, hungry, creeping closer as if hearing their every word. The air crackled with energy, the silence suffocating. "If we don't do this, we both die," she whispered harshly. She felt it, a creeping realization pressing down on her. Was she willing to risk everything for a chance to survive? "Do we trust in the past to save us?" she murmured, her hands shaking as she clutched the journal. "What if we're just feeding the darkness?" Alex said, his voice cracking, dread drawing lines across his face. "We don't have time to question it," she snapped, urgency fueling her heartbeat. "We have to act now." As they prepared, a fresh wave of shadows swept towards them, overwhelming, thrumming with chaos. With every heartbeat, she realized the choice was upon them. Would one of them be brave enough to sacrifice what they held dear, or would they both fall victim to the abyss lurking hungrily at their backs? As the whispers reached a fever pitch, Mia faced Alex, uncertainty flashing in her eyes but clarity in her heart. "Only one way out. Are you with me?" The shadows lunged, darkness tearing through the air, and the truth demanded to be faced. Would they embrace it or let it consume them whole? And in those fleeting moments, the form of a familiar face appeared within the darkness, beckoning. Is it too late? Clarity turned to dread as tears welled in her eyes and the shadows closed in around them, tightening their grip. What awaited them on the other side? Would they find freedom, or would they spiral deeper into the maddening void? Mia's breath caught in her throat, the familiar face growing clearer amidst the seething shadows. It was her brother, Ethan. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The darkness swallowed his voice, making him seem like a ghost trapped between worlds. Panic surged within her, clawing at her insides. Was he a vestige of hope, or a harbinger of their doom? Mia! Look out! Alex yanked her back just in time. The shadows lunged, snapping at where she had stood a moment before. They coiled and slithered, eager to drag her into their endless embrace. Ethan! She screamed, reaching out, her heart breaking at the sight of him fading within the dark. Get away! You shouldn't be here. A low rumble filled the room, as if the very walls mourned her desperation. The shadows shifted, reforming around them like a live tapestry of despair. You have to choose, Mia. Came a disembodied voice that echoed around them, pulling at the threads of her sanity. Make the sacrifice or perish. Her hands trembled over the journal's pages, fingers grazing the words of the ritual. Each one felt like fire against her palm, igniting fear and determination in equal measure. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. The thought of losing Alex tore her apart. How could she think of sending him away or herself? Do we just give in to this? Alex's voice trembled, eyes scanning the encroaching darkness with sheer disbelief. We can't just become like them. He pointed to the news clipping still pinned to the wall, the faces of the missing staring back at them like a gallery of souls in agony. Above the growling crescendo, she heard subtle whispers rising from the shadows, words lost in a shouting vortex. We have to fight. She shouted, suddenly fierce. We can't let them take us. Not like this. But as she spoke, dread settled deep in her bones. The shadows recoiled momentarily, sensing her resolve, then surged forward once more, venomous and relentless. Her eyes flicked back to Ethan's fading form as she realized this wasn't just about her, it was about the choices of those who came before. The ones who were trapped in these very tunnels. We need to find the salt. She yelled, a spark of desperation igniting a flicker of hope. It's part of the ritual. It's supposed to create a barrier. Or it could do nothing. Alex shouted, panic swirling in his dark eyes. It might just make it worse. Worse than this? She argued, the shadows shrieking dangerously close. We have to try. I refuse to be another name on that wall. They stumbled toward the barrels lined against the far wall, their contents obscured by a thick layer of dust. She yanked them open, frantically tossing aside debris. Her fingers brushed against something cool and bagged salt. Yes. Yes. Mia breathed, clutching it to her chest. But even as they clutched their prize, the shadows pressed harder, pulsating with fury, drowning out their last whispers of hope. The journal slipped from her grasp, landing spread open on the floor. A gust of wind twisted through the room, flipping open to the final pages where the ritual's climax lay written. To bind yourself, offer what you hold dear, she read aloud, her heart pounding. Only then may you break the binding of darkness. Mia exchanged a tortured glance with Alex. His eyes reflected her own horror and understanding. No, we can't. The shadows lunged closer, the air thick with despair. Suddenly, Ethan's face reappeared, clearer now, eyes pleading yet filled with an urgency that spoke volumes. You have to choose, Mia. Trust or darkness. Sobs shook her, mingling with the growl of the gathering storm. Would she sacrifice Alex? Or would they face the abyss together? The weight of the choice curled around her like the very shadows threatening to consume them both. The question loomed: could love withstand the darkness, or would the past repeat itself? Mia. Alex's grip tightened around her arm, eyes wild with fear. We have to act now. But Mia's heart waged war against her mind. Whatever they did next would change everything. Then, from the corner of her eye, a flicker, a glint of something shining within the murky shadows. Hope? Or a trap? In that moment, she realized, choices made in fear often became shackles. And as the shadows roared, she knew what they had to do. They had to make their choice, one way or another. But with every choice came sacrifice. What would they ultimately pay to escape this nightmare? The darkness shivered as the shadows lunged once more, ready to reclaim their prey. Would they flee and leave everything behind? Or would they stand against the crushing void, never knowing what awaited? With trembling hands, Mia choked out the only words that mattered as the darkness spread around them. This ends now. And the shadows recoiled, their momentary hesitation revealing that the fight was far from over. What other horrors would they face as they sought a way to break free? Mia stood solid, the weight of their predicament heavier than the darkness pressing in. The air felt bracing, electric, as if the shadows themselves identified her attempt to rise against them. She took a deep breath, the salt tightly clutched in one hand, the journal pulled against her chest with the other. Trust, she whispered again, channeling all the power of her love for Alex, for Ethan, for the countless souls captured by the hunger of the shadows. The shadows scrabbled against the barrier of the sanctuary, hungry for despair, but they sensed her resolve. We don't have time to hesitate. Alex's voice broke through her moment of doubt, and the urgency in his eyes stirred her adrenaline. What do we do? Mia flicked her gaze back to the journal, where the last remnants of hope lay on the page. The ritual, it says we must offer what we hold dear. Are you suggesting no? She cut him off sharply, a surge of clarity bursting through her panic. Not in the way you think. It's not about selecting someone, it's about choosing to fight. The shadows coiled tighter, rising and swirling like a tempest. The wailing grew, a chorus of lost souls heightening the tempo of despair. But Mia had found her anchor. We unite our strength, Alex. We don't sacrifice one another, we fight together. The salt, we use it to cast our image across these shadows, to battle with light and truth. Mia. Alex's voice trembled with both fear and the burning desire to cling to her. Trust me. She yelled, seeing the remnants of Ethan shimmering in the darkness behind Alex, still pleading. She could feel the bond surging between them, the intense need to protect one another, to emerge from this nightmare together. As the shadows roared their protest, she hurled the salt onto the floor, creating a barrier, shimmering light slicing through the darkness. No more hiding. Mia cried, feeling the energy pulse as waves of light radiated from the salt circle. Together. She shouted, feeling a rush of power. She reached for Alex, their fingers intertwining fiercely as they stood united. Together. Alex yelled, the words reverberating like a battle cry through the cavern as they hurled their collective hopes and fears into the abyss. The shadows writhed in agony, recoiling from the brightness of their joined spirits. Then she began to recite the words from the journal, each syllable dancing with defiance as her voice built to a crescendo. We are more than your ghosts. We will not fade. The shadows screamed as the energy surged, ripping through their hearts and dispelling the darkness that surrounded them. They felt the ancient fear that had held her captive for so long unraveling into bravery, the chains binding lost souls beginning to break like threads of cobwebs. And there, mirrored in the chaos, were the faces of the other lost souls, their eyes full of light and longing, joining them in spirit. Mia could almost see the past wrapping around them, lines of connection forged through shared pain and hope, creating a bridge drowned in radiant light. The cacophony grew as the creature turned, shape-shifting, losing its tightening grip. Mia and Alex pushed against the energy, willing the shadows back as they began to scream, unable to hold their form in the wake of this newfound power. In an instant, shadows thundered against the barrier, a desperate howl of protest echoing through the corridors. The blinding light connecting them surged, and in that pulse, Mia felt time shift. It was a whirlwind, a tingling heat flooding her veins as the darkness began to unravel. A rush of air filled the chamber as the darkness receded, retreating before their united force. It's working. Keep going. Alex roared, his voice now stronger, buoyed by possibility. With one last desperate push, Mia held tight to the truth that choice reborn from love would always sever the strongest bonds of fear. No more lost souls. She shouted into the chaos. The last of the shadows howled in defeat, darkness twisting and collapsing in on itself as light flooded the room. Everything surged once, a final real unwinding before slipping into a hush. The light engulfed them, coiling around their bodies like a river, tearing them away from the shadow's grasp. It felt as if they were floating, free from the weight of all they had faced. Flickers of warmth and life filled the air as the hollow darkness shattered into thousands of fragments. She felt herself being pulled along into the light, until at last everything went white. Mia opened her eyes, blinking up into the stark, tangible brightness. She lay sprawled on the asphalt of the subway platform. Sunlight streamed down through a grated ceiling above, streaking across her face. She turned to see Alex beside her, dazed but alive, and they locked eyes. "Did we?" His voice trailed off in disbelief. "I think we did," Mia breathed, breathless with relief. They stood together, dust swirling up from the ground as the subway station returned to life. People moved about, commuters oblivious to the horrors beneath their feet. "Alex Ethan?" Mia's heart tightened as she glanced around for the familiar face, but he was gone. Perhaps his spirit had moved on, freed from the chains of the dark. Mia choked back tears, but then felt a sense of warmth inside. "We made it out. We fought together. We didn't lose each other. Sometimes it takes something truly terrible to realize the bonds we never knew we had," Alex said quietly, squeezing her hand. They emerged into the open air, the sky bright above them, echoes of laughter merging with the city's hustle. Freedom was sweet, yet the memories lingered like a haunting melody, a reminder of what they had faced. Mia turned to Alex. "We have to share the stories, help others understand the shadows." "Yeah, and make sure no one else goes missing," he replied, a fierce determination in his eyes. And so they walked forward, ready to face whatever awaited. Threading through the normalcy of life, they left the shadows behind, though they would never forget. Together, always together. Don't forget, this is just one story, but there are more awaiting your discovery. You need to subscribe now to this channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Leave your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Flood that section with your theories about the ending. And please, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel. Let us spread the stories together.